Hey there, welcome. My name is Jessica Buchanan, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author, professional speaker, and founder of Soul Speak Press, a non-traditional publishing company created for women who've been through something, now they know something, and they can teach us something. In Her Words is a podcast designed to support aspiring memoir authors on their writing and publishing journey. It's hard work, this writing and publishing stuff, and I want to empower you with encouragement and information so you can keep sharing your truth. So grab your coffee, your notebook, find a quiet space, and let's dive in. I am super duper just like pleased and excited, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, but particularly this week. I have a very special person on the show today. She's special to me in many ways, and Krista, I don't know if you know that I talk about you like all the time. And whenever I'm on like sales calls or when I'm talking to prospective authors who are thinking about working with Soul Speak Press, you are you're part of my pitch. You're part of my introduction because you're so crucially and critically important to the inception of Soul Speak Press, and also just in us being able to function in the work that we do. And I also I think of you as a mentor, and also a very dear friend. So I'm so excited to have such a special person on the show today, Krista Clive-Smith. And instead of reading her bio to you guys, I'm just gonna like drop her in and have her introduce herself. But Krista, welcome to In Her Words.
Oh, well, thank you. And I feel the same way. In fact, my husband and I were talking about this morning, and he said, "Good luck." And I said, "Well, I feel like I don't need luck because I'm talking to one of my besties." And this is a conversation that is so true to who we are and what we do. And the what we do is just an expression of the who we are for both you and I, which is why it's such a beautiful, incredible collaboration and relationship.
Ooh, I
Yeah.
just got chills. Like that happens to me every time I talk to you. I'm always so inspired. I'm usually crying. I get off of a call with you feeling like the best version of myself. You really are gifted in so many things, but in just propelling people to move closer to their goals and to up leveling. So I hope that you know that. And I know it's not just
Amazing.
that way. Why don't we start at the beginning? I was trying to, like you said, blow out the cobwebs of like, how long have we known each other and how did we meet? Is one thing I'd love to like get your recollection on. And then how did you start Merack? And let's talk about the like your journey.
All right. Well, how we met is a really great question. I think Shelby just introduced us by email. And
So
then
one of
you
those, hey,
were randomly coming to speak in San Diego. And so we knew if we were supposed to, if Shelby tells us to get together, we're just going to get together. And remember, we booked an entire like day together. And
yes,
we didn't even know each
know each other. We had one like exploratory call where we chatted about branding, and this was before I knew what I was doing. I think I was probably like still teaching or something at the time. And yeah, you had one night available, like out of the whole month, and it just happened to be the night that I was in San Diego because I had one night available, which I never get. You know, I always like come in, do my thing. You know, you're a speaker as well. You come in, you do your thing, and then you leave on the next flight out. But I had that one night, and we both, I don't know what possessed us to do this, but we booked 90-minute massages.
other.
We don't know each other, but let's go get massages.
Let's go on a date together and get
Yes, it's
massages
totally
and
like
then
that.
go for dinner. And
Like, what was that about? And then it had the most life-changing sushi. I still think about that sushi sometimes. It was life-changing. It altered my life.
we're going back.
I know.
Don't worry, girl. May's coming for us.
So yeah, so okay, so obviously we had an epic first date, and then it turned into a business partnership of sorts. But I'd love for you to tell our listeners about how you got started in the publishing industry and what led you to where you're at now.
All right. So the most important thing, and I want to add value as I tell my story because this is not about me. It just is my story illustrates learning that you and the listeners can gain wisdom from. And so when you're talking about how when we get off a call, you feel closer to the highest and sort of your favorite version of yourself, because I don't know if there's a best self, but we each have a favorite version of ourselves.
Of that.
And what I love about bringing our favorite selves to the table is that's where the messy, the disorganized, the, marked and scarred, beautiful self can shine through. And
Mm.
so I think it's really important as we go backwards to my history that's brought us to this moment, that you understand that I believe that each of us is created with immense innate factory setting giftings, but we're also the part of the gift set is our weaknesses. And those are actually a massive asset, because I view weaknesses as rumble strips on a freeway
Mm.
where you're driving along in your lane. And as you start to fade out of your lane and get off course, they jar you back to reality to get you back where you belong.
Mhm.
And so the journey for me, my first company was a professional organizing company that I franchised. And I didn't know that by franchising my business as a legal growth model, that then I was no longer in the business of building and growing an organizing company, which I just wanted to be the best one on the planet. What I was now in the business of is selling franchises. And I
Mm.
would have never made that growth move had I known that, because
Yeah.
that wasn't the business I wanted to be in. So, but when we were in people's homes and offices organizing the space, and remember, this was early, this was 2001. There was no Marie Kondo. Nobody knew what the heck I was doing. Every idea I've ever had has been 20 years too soon. And that, for the longest time, really affected my self esteem, because I couldn't understand why people couldn't see what I could see in the
Right.
world. And so when we were in people's homes and offices reinventing the space, I started to notice that people's possessions tell a story about who they really are. And so that led me to thinking about this idea of personal branding, because I've always been a brand girl at heart. Really, like, I believe that when we show up powerfully as ourselves, it creates associations in the minds of our target audience, the people
Yeah.
we're interacting with. And so then if I thought, well, what if we proactively shape those perceptions by intentionally putting ourselves together, putting our lives together in a way that when people interact with us, our space, everything, they're like, oh, that's who she is,
Yeah.
really. And so I wrote a book on personal branding. But
Yes.
this was again in 2003. Social media hadn't been invented yet in the
Right.
way we know it today. Like
Yeah.
MySpace had, but it was for weird bands and things.
Exactly.
So when I set about the publishing journey for my own book in 2003, I explored self-publishing, I explored traditional big house publishing, and I looked at everything in between. But in those days, there wasn't a lot in between. And I thought, you know what? I don't want any of this stuff.
Hmm.
Like, I knew as an author what I wanted. And so Merack Publishing was born with my vision of knowing that I would publish my book. But right from minute one, I built a brand that I knew would go on to publish for other people, because I often have this realization when I'm looking at the marketplace. I'm like, nah, I don't want that. I don't want that.
Mhm.
And I know exactly what I do want. And so whenever I can't find it, that's kind of the wink from the universe to me that it's my job to create it and to build it.
Oh
And
my.
so that's what Merack Publishing is. It's a publishing company, like a boutique nonfiction publishing house built by an author for authors.
Okay, so I want to I mean, all of that is amazing. But I want to know specifically what it was about traditional big house publishing and then conversely self-publishing that you didn't want.
Yes. So I didn't know. I was at a crossroads, and I was on an airplane flying from Toronto to Vancouver. And the woman in front of me had a very loud voice. And it turns out she is an influencer of note in the food space
Okay.
in Canada. But at the time, she and I were in similar kind of parts of our career, she was further ahead as an author. And I heard her speaking to the person in the seat beside her about how she had self-published her first book and she just got picked up by a house for her second book, like a traditional publishing house. And I was like, this chick has the answers to my questions. This
Uh-huh.
is amazing. So I got up and went to the restroom and I came back and I like touched her arm and I said, I couldn't help but overhear what you're saying. I'm an author. I've got my manuscript ready and I'm at the crossroads of self-publishing or big house. Can we talk? She's like, yes. And she like rearranged all the seating and we sat down. And for the next 4 hours, we had this incredible conversation. And so she told me the story how with the second book that she got picked up by the big house. So traditionally with a big house publisher contract, you get a royalty of 10%.
Yep.
So her book retailed for $19.99 cookbook. So essentially for round numbers, $2 for every book sale comes back to her as the royalty.
Okay.
And her deal with her publisher is that her wholesale cost for the book was $9.99. So she had to pay $10 per book to get author copies that then she could sell at the back of the room at speaking engagements.
Okay.
So then one day she walked into Costco and there was her book on the shelf in Costco
Uh-huh.
and it was selling for $11.99. So all of a sudden it became a better deal for her to push the giant cart up to the buy her own book,
Yeah.
full retail at Costco, get the $2 royalty sent back and the sales credit so it looked like the book was selling well and use those copies to sell at the back of the room.
Okay.
And in that moment, it was like a lightning bolt hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, after the labor of love that it is to write and produce and create a book that will be your legacy, if I have to push a cart up myself and load my own book and pay full retail, I'm like, no. I knew in that moment there had to be a better way. And so I wanted to retain the rights and royalties as a self-published author. I wanted to retain creative control. You know, her book that got picked up, the title wasn't what she wanted. The aesthetic, like the whole vision was just controlled by someone else.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't hers at the end of the day. But I also, with self-publishing, I didn't want to be out there alone. I didn't want to have to figure out who am I going to get to design my covers and my interior.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted a team of experts, but I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. So here we are.
So here we are. And so that is what Merack Publishing House is. It's your cake that you can eat too.
Exactly. You retain all the rights and royalties of a self-published author with a world-class team of experts behind you.
And so I have been working with you guys for a couple of years, and we have published 4 books so far. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 more books in the works through Soul Speak Press as an imprint of Merack Publishing. So let's talk first about what kind of manuscripts then you publish at Merack and why, like what an imprint is then. And we could talk a little bit about why I chose to go that direction instead of publishing directly with Merack.
Yes. So it all goes back to personal branding. So our niche as a publisher is as a boutique nonfiction house. So because it's nonfiction, most of our authors will monetize their expertise beyond the book through speaking, through online courses, through the development of teachable content.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, and because of the personal branding work I had already done and created, I've created a business model for personal brands where you essentially flip the org chart and you become the brand. And then you have different consumer facing brands or products that hit the world in different ways, but they're all aligned to one main platform for you as an author. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because our very first book we published, other than mine, with Merack, actually was a fiction book. And so, and it's to the moment, the only fiction book we've ever published.
Okay.
And so it just, I loved the experience, and Ashley loved the experience of publishing this fiction book. And because I was originally a child author myself, and I did write fiction back in those days.
Mhm.
But we also really realized how fiction didn't fit with the vision of the other parts of what we do, because Merack Publishing is publishing land, which is like a land that sits inside Disneyland, where there's, Neverland, Tomorrowland, Toontown for the kids. So publishing land is one land in the bigger theme park of what we offer as our complete family of companies offering. And so making that decision after we published the fiction book to, okay, no, we're nonfiction people.
Mhm.
Fantastic. And just we found that going ever more tightly niched just gave us an opportunity to then, once we started to work with imprints. So you can think of an imprint as really what's the logo that's on the spine and the back of the book, and who does that belong to? And the sort of collective of all the books that bear that logo become the body of work that's the asset for an imprint. And so I had all these incredible, very predominantly female
Yeah.
thought leaders and visionaries and geniuses who have huge communities, and the people really want to put their story into form in something that will outlive them on this earthly lifetime, which is one of the greatest sacred gifts of being in the publishing world, is that we get to produce products that will outlive people, where generationally their families and people around the world will know them, and they will live on past their earthly life. And so it's not lost on me every day of my life,
Yeah.
the privilege and the honor it is to get to do this work.
Yeah.
But going back to how and why the imprint is, we wanted to find other women like you
Mhm.
who have totally different visions, but who we could support so that together we could be more,
Yeah.
because you want to create a customer experience for your author. You want to, in the case of your anthologies, bring together a collection of authors.
Mhm.
And so now, if and when we have any opportunity for anthologies or for women who are really striving to turn their mess into their message, we know exactly how we can bring them to you
Right.
or to any one of our imprints, who all have a very different niche, and together we're better.
I love that so much. Um, so I mean, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as a non-traditional nonfiction publishing house, in terms of, bringing in, I guess, prospective authors, and then, just through the entire the publishing cycle, if you will. What are some of the greatest challenges that you guys face?
Yeah, the two biggest ones that we have faced and we're working actively and have been working the last couple of years to overcome them are capacity and post production. So
Okay.
I'll explain each one of those. The getting of the clients, actually, knock on all the wood everywhere, has been relatively the easy part. And I think that's because we don't do any marketing whatsoever. We focus solely on doubling down on the quality of the relationship we have with the client and the product we produce, because we know that if we do great work,
Yeah.
it will come. And so it did take a couple of years to get the flywheel spinning, so that referral engine just produces beautifully on its own. But once it got going, that's where all the magic is. And that's really what we love best, because our great clients who we serve, they know other great people. And it's
Yeah.
just created this magical, we pinch ourselves every day that we get to do this work with the people we get to serve and support.
Mhm.
But capacity became an issue for us, because when you're working one-to-one with the end user, like the retail publishing client, the author themselves, there's a whole layer of communication that needs to happen that when we're working with an imprint, we now see it's much more systematized and streamlined, because for most authors, this is the first time they're doing it.
Yeah.
Or if it's the second or third, as some of our authors are, there's a long enough time in between that you kind of forget. You know,
Yeah.
when we've had kids, how it was like
Yes. Yes. It's
painful,
amnesia.
and then you go forth and you forget, and then you get back there, you're like, oh yes, now I remember.
Yes.
And so and so one of the things to increase our capacity was, rather than working with hundreds of retail individual authors, if we strategically choose and have these glorious, incredible imprint relationships where our client is the imprint and the imprint's client is the author, now we can create economies of scale, yet keep the quality and keep the feel of this boutique. You're always talking to a human who
Yeah.
is touching your work.
Yes.
And we never want to lose sight of that feeling. So for me as an entrepreneur, there was a book written by Bo Burlingame called Small Giants.
Mhm.
And conceptually, that's my jam. I want a high culture company filled with a tiny group of exceptional humans who do really fabulous work, but who together we can have exponential impact in terms of the size of the reach and the expansion. So that's really at the heart of it all. And that's where us trying to work over the years to train up uh, our imprints to support them in making it as easy for them to also work with more authors becomes part of it. The second challenge is post-production, printing, marketing,
Yeah.
all of those things. So
Mhm.
we had to make a strategic decision to put in kind of an electric fence around the theme park. And where that begins and ends is we are a production house.
Mhm.
We produce beautiful, incredible things, and then we hand them back to whomever we're contracted to produce the product for. And then it is their job to go forth and market and do all of those things.
Yeah.
Because we can't be great at everything. And so we really have to maintain that quality I'm talking about, we have to stay true to what we're here to do. But knowing that, outside of the theme park, I'm actively investigating buying some printing companies, or at least one to start, because even in partnership, I haven't found the right people yet.
Mhm.
So it's important for me to solve that problem for our
Mhm.
authors and our imprints and their authors, so that after they, have a wonderful experience with us, when the books don't show up on time for the launch party, or there's a printing, because
I
you know
know.
this to be
I
true.
know. I just had an
It,
email this morning with an author who is like, I'm in California. I have an opportunity to do a book signing. I need books in 2 weeks. Is it possible? And Lauren I saw her response and she's like, we can try, but that's tight. And I'm like, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Like that should be enough time to get 20 books.
oh, you order a book on Amazon and it's there the next
I
day.
know. I know.
Exactly.
It is really it can be really frustrating. And especially with like publishing timelines, right? That keep getting like pushed back. And like I know for us, like for the Deserts to Mountaintops, the anthology brand where I'm the lead author, we have a fixed publishing date because it's a special anniversary date for me. I think a lot of times books you can push the publishing date back, but ours is very fixed. And so when we're up against that like deadline, it's really stressful. And Ashley, God love her, we're referring to Ashley, who is, what is her title? She's
Head of
like
publishing.
head of publishing. Yes, so she's my point of contact. You and I rarely actually interface outside of like our own personal WhatsApp podcast that we have. But like I like my mind was blown. Okay, here, let me just give you an anecdote and brag on Ashley a little bit. I had it was New Year's Eve this year. And I had an author send me an email in the anthology, and she had just realized after everybody had gone through the digital like layout and approved their chapter, she just noticed that her name was spelled wrong in 2 places. And I mean, First of all, that's like just a huge deal, right? And how many sets of eyes have we had on this? Not to mention her own several times, right? But it happens. These things happen, right? So we had already like been approved by Ingram. We were all set up. It was ready to go. Yes, we had 25 days till publish date, but everything was ready to go. So I email Ashley and I'm like, I hate to do this to you, but we have to pull the book and fix this. And, I know it's New Year's Eve and I don't expect an answer for, a week or so. She emails me 5 minutes later, says, I already pulled the book. I fixed it. I've resubmitted it for approval. And I like contacted the author and she was like, I almost threw up when I read that. And I was just like, where in God's green publishing earth would you ever have somebody respond to you? I mean, I've traditionally published. Good Lord. I was like, you don't understand
You'd
how
have
special this
got your
is.
response on January 8th or 9th.
Yeah. I
And
would
it
have,
would have been an email saying, okay, we'll put it in the pile.
if that, I was just like blown away. And I was just like, forever and never in a million years would I ever deviate from this partnership or this method of publishing. Because it's so personal, it's so intimate, it is so there, you guys are so invested in the quality and in our overall success in our experience. And every author that I've worked with, and we've worked with like over 60 at this point, would say the same thing. I know they would.
Well,
So,
and that's why I'm sitting over here bawling my eyes out while
yeah.
you're talking about this, because it is it is truly the privilege and honor of a lifetime to have people like Ash. I mean, she's like the sister I never had. We've
Yeah.
been together since 2005. She, was straight out of university, but working for the organizing company in a job where she's not using the English lit degree that she, got. We always wondered where that would come into play. And now as head of publishing, she is
Yeah.
exactly doing what she's been put here to do. But just, you sharing that story, it just, I mean, for her to be the face of this company and to be representing in that way, it's humbling
Yeah.
as the entrepreneur. It
Yeah.
really is. And I'm so grateful. And she is so exquisitely, exceptionally talented at what she does. It is amazing.
Yeah. All your entire team is. They're incredible. And I always just feel like I'm in such good hands. And like I'm still learning, I mean, essentially I've been in this business for a decade, but really on the author side. So I've only been doing the publishing side for a couple of years. While I've learned a lot as an author about what I want and what I don't want in terms of what I want my authors to experience, there's still like, and I'm not a details person either, right? So, which is why I have an integrator. When we talk a lot about this, that's why I have Lauren, so that she can handle all of those logistics. But to know that I can confidently say, as someone who's a visionary, who's a creative, to my clients, that I'm doing all of the developmental editing with, I know for like I would bet my life on the fact that your book is going to be as perfect as possibly as is possible, because we have so many talented people working on it. We have so many people who are committed to excellence, and I had a call, another story, because we're in the business of storytelling, right? So um I had a call with, we had an author come in with we have a couple of different packages that we offer, right? So one of our like most basic packages, if you bring us a finished manuscript, allegedly they're supposed to be squeaky clean. They've worked with outside editing, but it's never like that, right? And we know that. So we take that into account. Um, and our copy editor was working on it. She got halfway through and she said, yo, this is not ready. Like we are not, we need some developmental support here. We need to go in and rework some things. So then I have the job of breaking that to the author. And so we got on a call with her developmental editor And we had to have this really uncomfortable conversation. But, I said, like, there are standards that we have to meet in order for it to, meet the publishing protocols to be published by Soul Speak Press and by Merack, right? Like, because everything we put out is a representation of our separate brands. And the editor, or the editor that she was working with, said to on the entire call, I think, to the author, I think this is an extraordinary opportunity for you, because she was lumping us in with hybrid, and I said, nope, we're not hybrid publishers, but that's another conversation. But she was like, most non-traditional publishing companies would just take your manuscript and publish it, um, and take your money, not with no regard to the quality. And I think that this is an incredible opportunity for you to make your manuscript the best version it can be. And I almost burst into tears on the call, because I was like, thank you for another professional in the industry to recognize that we move from a place of integrity and in alignment, not only from a branding perspective, but because we believe in that it's worth the work and the hassle and the headache to get your story to a place where it can be, I love how you reframed, maybe not the best, but your favorite version.
Because isn't that it? Like when you leave a call feeling like your favorite self after we've spoken, well, if
Yes.
your book is going to outlive you in your earthly lifetime, don't
Yes.
you want it to be the polished, shiniest, showroom condition version of who you were in this lifetime? Don't you
Yes.
want it to be like the Technicolor favorite self at the highest level? Heck
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Heck
And,
yeah.
I can say, like, my first book that was traditionally published, that was a New York Times bestseller, I go back to that book and I cringe in a lot of places, because I had no autonomy in certain places. I had no creative license. They told me what to do. We fought, we fought, we fought. There are places in there that are not representative of who I was then or now. And so, yes, now when I go back to the books that we've published where I have had, well, I own Soul Speak Press, so I get to be in charge. But, I want every single one of my authors who has taken that courageous step to turn their story into this generous contribution, to be able to go back and look at that and feel really freaking proud.
Exactly. And I had a little sign in my office for years that said, don't stop until you're proud. And
Mhm.
that's exactly it. That is the relentless commitment to keep going until you feel I can let it go.
Yeah.
Which, when you have high standards, and a lot of the authors we work with are perfectionists, it's so hard to let it
So
go.
hard.
And that's where we're not waiting for it to be perfect. We're waiting until you're proud. Like when there's a
Love that.
feeling when you know you've given it your all and you can just let it go. And when it's there, that's the moment.
Oh my God. I love that so much. I learn so much from you every time I have a like a conversation, or even if it's asynchronous, I'm always like, that is such a gem. That is such a nugget. I need to write that down. Um, so what would you like, what would your advice be to, and I'm going to use like specific yet generic labels, seeing as how I only work with women, to the woman who has a story to tell and wants to move in this direction, can see herself on stages speaking, but is just like afraid they don't have what it takes. Um, what would you say to her?
Number one, it's not about you. And the minute you can realize it's not about you and get out of the freaking way, the better off everybody is,
Mm,
because it quiets the critic, it quiets all of those things. When you go forth into the world looking to add value, it's never about you. It's
mhm.
how can I use what's happened to me the stories and my wisdom and all of that, how can I use that in service to another? Then that self-consciousness goes away.
Yeah.
And so that would be number one, is just realize and remember it's not about you. Number two is our secret sauce that we've developed at Merack is producing books that are what we call one part memoir, one part manual, and one part manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
So the manifesto is the big dream you hold in your heart for the reader and for all of humanity. And even if you're a speaker, it's like, what is that? If you had the world's attention for 2 minutes, what story would you tell?
Mm-hmm.
What is that big dream that if you could make a dent somewhere in the universe that you would want to make? So that's the manifesto. And because of who we are and how we roll, we want that to be positive and inspiring and exciting, to create a vision that'll help people have a bigger future than their past, because that's what propels us to greatness, is to striving towards that bigger future. Then when we look at how-to book, if it was just how to, ChatGPT could write it for us. Right. Especially in the nonfiction world.
Yeah.
But what we really focus on with the methodology and the manual component that's in the middle is teachable curriculum. And I want you to think about the book as having a skeleton. So you have a table of contents, but the skeleton for the signature system, that really is the teachable curriculum that if you were to teach it to 5 different audiences that were very different to each other, you would be able to find the common message across all 5 of those. And that's the skeleton methodology that you would be putting into the manual that's teachable.
Okay.
And then the third part, which is the memoir, is the juicy stories.
Yeah.
That can never be replicated by anybody on the planet. So when you're going to tell stories in your book, please tell stories that have happened to you, or case studies that have happened to your clients, that are those things that can't be competed against. You can never be made wrong for, which can also help you kind of with the haters, is our own experience informs our experience. So like, use that in service of others. And remembering that I really believe that our ideal clients as business owners is, and that can go for an author with a target audience, our ideal clients are a former version of ourselves.
Love that.
And so when we look backwards through the seasons of our lives, each season has a different teachable point. And then it has a different collection of stories to illustrate that. So that's really what the memoir piece is. And pure memoirs are awesome. And as a reader, for me personally, when I read a great memoir, I finish it and I think that was awesome for them.
Right.
Where's the how can I take what I just read and apply it to my own life to create transformation there?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to work that hard as a reader. So that's part of why we have that 3-part formula. So I would say, get out of the way, look at your lifeline, look at the seasons, look at what you've learned. In fact, we give an exercise to prospective authors where they create a little chart where there's a line down the center, which is 0. Then you've got +1 all the way up to +10, -1, -10. And then along the bottom is 0 to their current age. And you plot on it in one color pen all the events that have happened to you in your lifetime. And then in a different color pen, you put all of your achievements and your failures or your mistakes. And when I say mistakes, I mean miss-takes, just like it takes millions of takes to get it right in the movies. So why we think we would get it right in humanity, I never know that.
Yes.
And especially you'll notice below the line, ask for each one of those events, mistakes, failures, and look at the successes and achievements and happy events as well. But it's below the line, what was the lesson I learned from that? And being able to almost extract and articulate it. And then when you look at that map, that is what I call your authority map.
Mm-hmm.
So as a thought leader, this is what you should be talking about, everything that's on this map, and then finding ways to, whatever the lesson is, put it into some teachable how-tos.
Yeah.
action items, best practice that you've learned in your own life that helped you through the journey to from where you started to where you are today.
I love that. I think, we ask that our authors do that in some ways. It may be a little bit more like entrenched in their memoir. But I'm always asking them, we say we're looking for women who've been through something, now they know something and they want to teach us something. Like those are the
Yes.
stories that we're looking for, right? And our writers, even that can easily be done in a chapter in our anthologies, or it can be done in an entire manuscript. But I think again, I can see how like the bigger picture, which is also a conversation I try to have with authors as we're working through their manuscript in terms of like, okay, so when the book is done, what are we going to do with it? Like what's your plan here? And I see this all the time, especially on social media, because I'm a pretty heavy social media user. Um, I see like these memoirists in particular have like great success on their book that's bestseller, blah, blah, blah. They do a media tour, yada, yada, yada. And then like 6 months later, you never see them again. Because what was the plan? Right? What are we gonna like? What are we gonna do? Like, what platform are we building? Are we gonna, like how? And so I think that that is very prudent of you at Merack to look, and again, that is thought leadership, isn't it? Right? To map out that journey and know where you hope the destination is going to be. Usually it supersedes that. Sometimes it falls short of it. Um, in terms of your storytelling. And I think that you have to think about that no matter what genre you're writing in, but in particular, um, and I think it goes back to the three questions that you often ask me, which are,
On freaking repeat
yeah,
every minute of every day. I think every WhatsApp personal podcast, I
oh,
ask you the same
yes.
three questions.
And what are these three
What
questions?
bit what business do you want to be in? What life do you want to lead? And who do you want to serve? And we kind of talked about the who you want to serve, the former version of yourself,
Yeah.
in which season, and what product do you want to design for that person in that season. But let's just focus on the other two. So and I would love for you to start with what life do you want to lead first, but thinking about those two in an infinity loop. So when you look at the life you want to lead, for example, our daughter was 7 at the time, my husband and I in 2019, we sold off our lives and we moved to Africa for a year. And now we split our time between San Diego, South Africa, and Canada for ski season. And that dream of this life has been inside me since
Forever.
probably the late 90s.
Okay.
Yes. And so, but what's interesting is I built my first company completely wrong.
Mm,
I mean, like literally brick by brick with my own two hands, I built a prison that I was living in.
yeah.
And then I had the Jerry Maguire like aha moment at the investor
Investor
table
table.
with the term sheet in front of me, pen in hand, about to sign off on our North American expansion. And I just realized if I sign that sheet, it's all over.
Yeah.
I'm a prisoner for life.
Mm,
And so obviously I didn't. But that being said, if you start with the life, because let's imagine you want to be a speaker. Okay,
hmm.
well, what kind of a speaker do you want to be? Because there's everything from being an MC to being a panelist to being a breakout session speaker to being a keynoter
Yeah.
and a facilitator. There are millions, of options. So if you decide, I want to be a keynote speaker, because you can picture yourself on that stage in the stadium. Well, I want you to think about the day in the life of a keynote speaker.
It's hard.
Is that the life you want? Do you want to be a road warrior
Yeah.
on planes, dealing with time zones and logistics and travel? Because that is actually the life of a speaker. The
Hmm.
stage part is a very teeny tiny
Very.
portion of the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and then if you then start to look at the life you want to lead and then the business you want to be in, every lifestyle decision creates a business implication. Every business decision creates a lifestyle implication. So if we can create our goal to find ways to creatively create harmony on both sides, that's when you've hit the sweet spot.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so for me, I love to travel, but I don't want to be doing it speaking.
Right.
So I'm a virtual girl. I'm completely, utterly, 100% introverted,
Mm-hmm.
even though introvert. I'm at home, my yoga pants and Ugg boots from the waist down every day of my life, looking good in the rectangle on the top half. I leave my house once a month for a one in-person business meeting that I have that is worth leaving the house for every month. Everything else is virtual, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're traveling the world,
Yes.
but I'm not doing it for business. I'm doing it for pleasure.
Yeah.
So that.
Okay. All of that. Yeah. And I mean, all of that like so resonates with me because I feel so in alignment right now with the work that I'm doing with Soul Speak Press. It's just, it feels so purpose filled. And I'm not 100% an introvert, so I need some of those. I need to leave my house like more than once a month. And so, and I do keynote and I love that. I love those opportunities. But what I love the most is when I get off the stage and then I get to connect with women afterwards, like sitting down with them, like connecting with them, meeting up with someone local, like hearing their story. I just did a keynote earlier this week, and I spent the next hour when I was done listening to this woman's story. She was on the board that brought me in, and her husband had had a stroke and almost died. And she just like walked me through the entire thing. And it was very fresh, like, all of this. And just like, I don't know, like that space holding and whatnot. And the fact that I get to do that every day with Soul Speak Press when I'm working with our authors feels just so, um, I feel so lucky, just like you,
It's
that I have that
sacred work, right?
sacred. It's so weird. Let me tell you what happened to me last night. I ran into a friend, one of my daughter's friends' mom, dropping off at dance. And she's been like very supportive of the work that we're doing in anthologies, but we're very different, I think very different people, very different lines of work. And she said to me, I just finished the second anthology, and her eyes got really wide and she went, those were some hard stories. And I said, yeah, yeah, they are. Like these women have really traversed, or, something to that extent. And so we chit-chatted a little bit, and then I got in the car and I pull out, and I had this thought of like, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I doing this the wrong way? Like, are these stories too heavy? Like, maybe we need to change our approach. Like, maybe we need to make things like a little bit fluffier and lighter. And I'm sitting at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I got chills from my head all the way down to my very tired toes. And that is how, like, you and I were both like, woo meets the work, right? Like, that is how source, my spirit guides talk to me. And it was like, no, ma'am, you know exactly the work you've been put here to do in the world. You will not soften or censor these stories to make them more palatable. You have been put here to allow a space for women to come in and speak their truth, no matter how ugly and grisly it gets.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
thought, it's just, I'm not for everybody. Soul Speak Press is not for everybody. Merack is not for everybody. But for the ones that we are here for, we are here 150,000%.
Yeah. And look at your own life story. It's
Yeah.
hardcore. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
it's
not
as
exactly
hardcore as
palatable.
hardcore comes. And I believe that the three kind of attributes that I strive as Krista to be and to embody is courage, creativity, and generosity.
Mm,
And those kind of all align together with integrity. But courage is the Latin root of the word courage is cor, which is heart. And courage is one of the most underrated values on the planet, and it is so important. And for people to shine, for you to be shining a light on people who've had these grisly hard stories, the courage it took for them,
yeah.
like that shows people, oh, this little thing I'm dealing with over here, I can bring the courage to that because what the that person did,
Yeah.
holy smokes. And it helps us see and put into perspective the hashtag first world problems that a
Yeah.
lot of us are dealing with day in and day out. And for those who are really not dealing with first world problems, it gives them a compassionate guide to share the journey with. They're
Yes.
not alone. And
Yeah.
so by diluting that or going small, I think that changes who you are on this
Yeah.
planet. And
Yeah.
please, I encourage you with every ounce of my being to not be the full technicolor version of
Yes.
yourself. And not everybody can handle it, and they're not your audience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's really important for authors to understand is that, you're not everybody's cup of tea. Your story isn't going to resonate. People aren't going to support you. Conversely, you sharing your story in an authentic and an honest and courageous way absolutely will change someone's life. It could save their life.
Yes.
It,
And that's the joy of the type of publishing that you and I are doing,
Mhm. Yes,
is that we want the authentic voice to
yes,
ring through. Like even on the ghostwriting side, when, inside the park where we have writing world, where
yeah,
we're actually writing for people, I say to our author or our writers, I say, get out of the way. It can't, like, there should be nothing of you here.
no,
I want, John, if we're writing for John or Joni or Jill or whoever, I want Joni's grandchildren's to know her. I don't
yeah,
want them to know you. And bringing all of your voice, if you're direct, if you're gritty, bring direct and
yes,
bring gritty. Because when you read the audiobook, which if you're in the nonfiction space, you're building a personal brand, you'll speak from a stage. I want that on the audiobook
yes,
recording. And I want it to be such that when you're reading the audiobook in the studio, you are there being yourself. It's not you reading a script that is somebody else, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Because then think of it when we fall in love with musical albums, right? And then we go and see the artist in concert and it's not the same thing. We're like, wait, what?
right, right. Because
Yeah, we
it's
want the audio and
diluted
video
or
to
yeah,
line up.
yeah.
And that's why you would choose non-traditional publishing, is to have the creative control to bring all of who you are to the project.
Yes, 100%. None of it's censored. Like you can, and that's what I
Exactly.
always tell my authors. Like, I'm going to give you our professional recommendations. Like, perhaps you don't want to put the F word in your book title, but like,
We learned that the hard way.
yeah,
Well, it wasn't the full F word, but what ended up happening is Amazon actually was an author who came in late in the game with us, because you'll remember a couple of years ago in publishing, that was a trend where
yes,
using curse words in
yes,
titles
yeah,
was like a thing.
yeah,
Uh, but what we didn't know is that Amazon actually, when that is the case, the keywording and the promotion of it actually gets dinged.
yeah,
And in this particular case, it was a takeover project from another publisher. So the title was locked, everything was locked and loaded.
yeah,
So, but we learned that the hard way through working with that client, that, oh, that's interesting.
yeah.
So yes, and that informs our professional opinion, because we'd never had that
Right.
situation
And
before where there was a.
when that situation arose with us, I immediately like pinged Ashley and was like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" She's like, "Don't do it."
We had this one time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly, exactly. But, at the end of the day, I always say to our authors, like, you do get the final say. So
Yeah.
this is your legacy work. This is your baby. This is your story. So I may not, there are certain things that certain protocols and guidelines that we have to stick with, just from a grammar perspective. But, like this is, this belongs to you until you release it out into the world. And then it belongs to the world and it has its own journey, as you've, very articulately explained. So, okay. So I mean, we could talk forever. And hopefully someday we'll get to do that. Um, if somebody's listening to this and they're like not really into necessarily straight up memoir, or perhaps they're not a woman or identify as a woman and they're not, Soul Speak Press isn't their jam, how would they connect with Merack and connect with you and float their project idea past you?
Yeah, they can just email either Ash or I. Easy for me is Krista at KristaClivesmith.com without the dash in the last name. And for Ash, just Ashley at MerackPublishing.com. And even if it isn't a Merack book, that's the joy of the imprint
Yes.
community that we're creating so that we can help you find a home for your work and for your book. And do we have time to talk about book sales? Because I
Yes.
think it's a really important topic, because you reference the life, like the journey of a book.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have time? Are you
I
cool with
have
that?
time. I have time if you have time.
I do, because I think it's so, so important. So the average book is only going to sell 200 to 210 copies in its lifetime.
Yep.
So very important expectation to have right then and
Yep.
there.
Yep.
That being said, my own book, I make $8.61 a book on Amazon in terms of royalties.
Yep.
It's really important to go in knowing and understanding that it's statistically, it's on your fifth to sixth book that you write as an individual author where you'll start to be able to make a living as an author, earning six figures or more from the
Interesting.
stats. Mm-hmm.
I did
Yes.
not know that. Okay, so
Yep.
I still have like 3 more books to go.
Here we go. Just keep churning them out.
Okay, okay.
Elizabeth Gilbert is proof
Yes.
of the
Yes,
pudding, right?
there is.
Everybody thinks Eat, Pray, Love was her first, but no, it sure wasn't. And it
No.
won't be her last.
Nope.
But that being said, when you release your book out into the world, it's not unlike your child, right? Where when you have kids, they bear your DNA, yet they have a life journey and a path that is uniquely their own. Your book baby is just like that. And it requires patience,
Mhm.
restraint, grace, compassion,
Yes.
love in allowing it to find its way in the world. My own book, we when it first came out, again, it was like 20 years too soon. No one knew what the heck I was talking about. So to the point where I eventually, actually, after a couple years, I just like pulled it
Oh,
from
really?
distribution and I put it away because it
Mm,
was actually damaging my mental health more having it out in the world than not,
not.
because even now the reviews on my book are terrible
Oh,
because no, people didn't get
they
it.
didn't understand
and
what
and
personal
now
branding.
it's quite old, which is quite funny, so I definitely have to write the new edition. But the point that I'm trying to make is that in 2018, fast forward from 2003 original release to 2018, I dusted it off, and the files were so old that we couldn't actually access properly the art files. So every first and last word on a 2-page spread had to remain the same. I could only change what wouldn't change the first and last word on
Oh
each
my
page.
God. Uh,
So we made just enough teeny tiny changes and put this thing up on Amazon. And we didn't talk about it that much, other than just I had a book launch party. It was actually my birthday party, but we had a cake that had a picture of the book cover. And it was the launch of me getting back into business building at a like high level because now Kennedy had been born, we'd
uh-huh.
gone back to school.
Uh-huh.
So that year, the book won a national book award, an international book award, and I got the call of a lifetime the next year in 2019 from Purdue University. And they were writing an undergraduate course and a graduate level course on personal branding. And they chose my old book to be the textbook. So,
Amazing.
so, but it's so easy
Yeah.
for us to just think of ourselves as failures, to beat
Yes.
ourselves up. Like,
You
and
have to
yet
look at the long game.
you got to play the long game.
It's big picture. It's long. Like that's what I tell my authors, especially for the anthologies. Like, hey, okay, we launched, but we're not done here. You got to keep talking about this thing. You got to keep hustling into a certain degree if you want your royalty split. Like it's, and I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for taking breaks and resting, which you obviously
Mm-hmm.
did. right? And then it does find its way. But I think that, yeah, just because you're only selling one book a day, or if you're lucky, or one book a month, in the first couple of years, is not indicative of it being an epic failure, or the lack of potential success it can have.
Yes, exactly. And allowing it to find its home, and to
Mm-hmm.
look at ways where you can create recurring revenue for your book. So, like Purdue, every new semester, there's a new crop of students who buy the book. So that creates this influx of residual sales
That's so awesome.
that, but thinking about that for every author,
Mm-hmm.
like, what could I do? Where could this book live that would generate residual recurring revenue based sales?
Yeah.
And trying to think about, like, when the person reads the book, is it the type of book where they're going to come away with a lot of questions? Is it, so then you might want to consider a companion journal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the person can reflect and answer those questions. And when you start to create ancillary products that serve and support the target audience reader, now all of a sudden the book is an experience.
Yeah.
And it's a multi-sensory tool that will help them unearth new parts of themselves to take them closer to greatness. So
Yeah.
whatever we can do to really look into the hearts of our books and our content and ask, if I'm the reader who is a former version of myself and this is helping me grow and become more, what are the best tools that I can give to that reader alongside this book that will continue to keep them asking the questions that will reveal new awarenesses, which lead to better choices, and better choices lead to better results.
So good. So good. I'm waiting for you to like offer up a bunch of digital courses. Is that in the works?
It should be in the works. I'm building software right now, but it is to solve the problem
Yes.
for us as writers. I've
Yes.
been saying I'm going to do a new edition of my book since the first book came out in 2003, and I can't get my butt in the chair to write my own book.
Yeah.
We're writing books for everybody under the
Right.
sun.
Right. I
And
get that. Yeah.
yes. And so the software I'm building is going to help the writer to overcome the emotional, psychological, logistical, and intellectual barriers to getting their butt in the chair to write their books.
And I
So
can't wait
that's my first priority. And then the courses come after.
to have a conversation around the software when you're ready to launch that and talk about that. We'll
Totally.
definitely have a conversation about that. Um, all right. Well, I mean, just thank
Other
you.
questions?
I mean, so many other questions, but I think we'll have to just do another episode.
Amazing. I'm here. I am here for you anytime and always, girl.
Well,
This is honestly, it
literally,
is
I hope you
what
know,
I've been put here to do is just help.
meeting you has changed my life.
Mine too.
So thank you.
I love and adore you. And thank you for the work you're doing in the world. Thank you for being such an incredible example of what true partnership at not just the soul level, but the human level and all the levels looks like. I believe that we are entering into an age where synergy is the way of the future. And it is like such an honor to be able to collaborate and partner and work with you on all of this. It really is.
We're just super lucky.
We are blessed.
In Her Words is hosted by me, Jessica Buchanan, and is produced by Soul Speak Press, a non-traditional publishing house for women who are ready to tell their story. If you would like to know more about our submission process, I encourage you to check us out at www.soulspeakpress.com or follow us over on Instagram at soulspeakpress. We appreciate all your questions, and if you would like to leave us a review, we would be so grateful.